So you're going to need the summary of trig identities for today's lesson. We're going to focus on these ones, the reciprocal identities, and then the quotient identities, the Pythagorean identities, and those are the ones we're going to focus on today. Now, this requires a lot of thinking and time and patience. So please make sure that you guys listen to every single little thing I say when I'm explaining these. And you need a lot of room too to do these problems. Now, I gave you improving trig identities. These are definitely more different than proving your geometry problems that you did back in sophomore year with geometry class. You must have the trig identity cheat sheet with you at all times. So this right here, you need to have it at all times to have. Okay, and then you will only work with one side, and usually it's the left side. You're going to leave the other side by itself. Do not use it. Nicely organize your work from top to down. Usually, or bottom, top to bottom. Usually simplify things to the sine and cosine. That's very helpful. You must be able to manipulate the Pythagorean theorem identity, so I'm going to help you with that. So sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. So remember, it's sine is your your y value. Cosine is your x value, and the unit circle equals 1. So that's how we got that. Okay, so let's erase that part actually. So right here you have 1 equals sine squared plus cosine squared. Okay, so you can also subtract the cosine squared theta on both sides, and you're gonna have sine squared theta is equal to 1 minus cosine squared theta. So that's another way you can see it. That's the Pythagorean identity, but you just manipulated this. You did some algebra stuff, you subtracted on both sides, and then you got that. So you can also use this. Or you can subtract the sine squared and have cosine squared equals 1 minus sine squared. These three equations are the same thing. You just moved it around. Okay. Same thing for the secant squared equals tangent squared plus 1. I can move the 1 over here and say that tangent squared of theta is equal to secant squared of theta minus 1. So that's another way you can see that. So you have the main one, which this is the main one right here. And then if you move it around, you can see this. Or you can move the tangent over here and have secant squared theta minus the tangent squared theta equals 1. So that's another way you can see it as well. And then we're going to do the same thing to the cosecant squared theta is equal to 1 plus the cotangent. So I can move the 1 over here. That's going to be cosecant squared theta minus 1 equals cotangent squared theta. So that's another way you can see it. Or you can move the cotangent over here. So that'll be the cosecant squared theta minus the cotangent squared theta equals 1. So those are various forms for that one. So each one has two other forms that you can see it. And then it says use algebraic manipulation like factoring or finding a common denominator or multiplying the denominator and numerator by the conjugate. Okay, so conjugate, we did that when we divided imaginary numbers. So now these are not imaginary numbers, but the conjugate of that is 5 plus 6i. So that's what they're talking about, the conjugate. You multiply the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. Okay? So that's just a little reminder of conjugate. So you just switch that sign to the denominator. And then all of these problems require thinking, time, space on paper. These problems cannot be done quickly, and you need to be patient and be able to try several things before something works. These are my most favorite math problems because this is where I know if students have really learned their math foundations. Okay, so go on to the next video to start for the first example.